Hello, in this video we are going to be exploring Liquid, Shopify's template language. We are going to see what problem Liquid is solving, how to do some of the most common things with it, such as variable declaration, looping, conditionals, filters, and so on. We'll also take a look at some of its limitations and how to work around a few of them. So in short, Liquid is a template engine created by Shopify that can be used for developing themes. And what it means to be a template engine is that we can create the structure of our pages using HTML and make its content change dynamically depending on what URL the user is visiting. Here you can see an example of this. This is a very basic Liquid template, and over here we have these regular HTML title tags, and in between the tags we have two pairs of curly brackets and this page title text here. This is how you output a variable in Liquid. So every page has a title, but let's say we don't want to create this structure for every single page. What we can do instead is create a template, create the structure over here, and the title will change dynamically depending on the page the user is visiting. The same will happen for the description over here, although here you can also see another element, a conditional. Liquid supports conditionals too, and what we are doing here is that only if the page has a description, then we are going to output this meta HTML tag, and we are going to here output the page description variable. You can also see that we are not limited to printing variables or outputting variables in the body of HTML tags or in between HTML tags. We can output them pretty much anywhere. Here we are outputting it for the value of this content attribute. So as long as the end result is valid HTML, you can put a variable anywhere. And here we have this pipe operator and then this truncate word and 150. In Liquid, this is called a filter, and what we are doing here is truncating the page description, as this title implies, as this name implies, to 150 characters. And this is how the output of this code over here will look like. Now, say that I wanted to change this 150 to just 100. We can see that the text changes accordingly, and we have now a shorter text here. Also, something else we can do is that let's say that we wanted to add our store's name after the page title. We can say something like this, my store, and over here we'll end up with this result. Here we'll have the page's title, no matter what page we're visiting in, and then we'll have the store's title at the end. Now, something we have to keep in mind before getting started is that Liquid runs on the server, and that has its pros and its cons. Its biggest advantage over other ways of having dynamic content, like say it with JavaScript, is that with Liquid, the HTML you send to the client already has the content in, so your user won't have to wait for an extra API call to be done to get that content, and you won't have to manage the complexity that comes with creating that interaction yourself through JavaScript. On the other hand, as it is only run on the server, it has no information about the user's device. So if you wanted to do something like render a section based on whether the user was visiting from a mobile phone or from a desktop, that's out of the scope of what Liquid can do, and instead you'll have to do it with JavaScript after the content is loaded on the user's device. Okay, so here from Visual Studio Code, the first thing we do is go to this snippets folder and create a new file here, call it tutorial.liquid, and here I will put hello from tutorial.liquid. Now the next thing I'll do is go to theme.liquid here in the layout folder, and I'll look for the body tag over here, and I'll add render tutorial. What this will do is that it will replace this line with the content of this tutorial file over here. For this to work, it must be inside the snippets folder. If I were to add it inside sections, it will give me an error. The same if I try to add it under any of the other folders over here. So now from theme.liquid, I'm going to run Shopify theme dev, and I'm going to pass the environment flag and specify the development environment. What this is in shopify.theme.toml here, I created this development environment where I'm specifying which store to run the commands in this folder against. So now I should have this theme running in localhost 9292. So let me go here, let me refresh this page, and I should see here the content of my store. So now let's go to tutorial.liquid. Let's delete this. And when you're following the tutorial on how to learn a programming language, even though Liquid is not a programming language itself, it shares some similarities with regular programming languages, like the capability of declaring a variable. So let's learn how to do that. For this, I'll open these delimiters over here of a curly bracket and a percentage sign, and I'm going to write assign my variable. This will be equal to hello world. Then I'm going to here print my variable, and if I go to the page here, I see that it's refreshed and I see hello world. Here, a moment ago we saw that this is how you print a variable. We enclose the variable name in between two pairs of curly brackets, and that's how you get this output over here. Now, another way you may see of declaring variables or creating directives in general is by doing this. So an open curly bracket, a percentage sign, and a dash. Here, for example, in this theme, this is done, by the way, Shopify's open source theme, this property first char variable is being declared that way. And what is the difference between doing it the way we were doing it with just an open curly bracket and a percentage sign, or adding the dash? Well, to see the difference, we'll have to view the page source here. I'll click on view page source, and I'm going to look for hello world here. We can see that the text is being printed as we expect, but there is an empty line above and there is an empty line below this. Why is this way? Here I don't have these empty lines. Well, in Liquid, when you declare a variable, or when you write Liquid code in general, this adds empty lines, and the way to remove those is by adding this dash to the declaration. So here, if I refresh this page now, this empty line got removed. I have this empty line below as well. And to get rid of that, I can add the dash over here as well. And the empty line below hello world also gets removed. That won't affect the overall output. So this is why both of them are valid, and you may see them being used interchangeably in different code bases. I think the important thing is that you stick with one or the other and be consistent with that across your code base. Overall, removing the empty line has the benefit that you send a tiny bit less code, less text to the client, but it is so minimal that I don't think it will make a significant performance impact. However, if you want to still use this, just try to be consistent across your code base. Something else you're probably noticing is that for the first declaration over here, I used an open curly bracket and a percentage sign, and for the second one, I used two curly brackets. So why is this? Well, if your Liquid line has an output, so say when you're printing a variable, you should use two curly brackets. Otherwise, like for example, when you are declaring a variable, this should not print anything. In these cases, you use an open curly bracket and a percentage sign. This will be the same if you were creating an if statement, a for loop, a switch, and things like that. We'll see how those look like later in the video, but just keep this in mind if you get confused along the way. Now that we've seen how to create variables in Liquid, let's see what data types we have available for us here. But before that, let's quickly take a look at how to create a comment in Liquid. So I'll delete all of this, and then I'll open a curly bracket, a percentage sign, and I'll write here comment, and then I'll do the same and write and comment. And now any text that I write here will be treated as a comment and therefore won't be rendered in the page. So here I can say this is a comment and should not render. And if I visit the page here, I won't see anything. Now let me type some example hello world here, so we can see that this is still rendering content. So the hello world gets rendered, but the comment above this is not. Now, as this also accepts HTML, we can also use an HTML comment here, so HTML comment. And this will also work fine. We can write anything here, and the user, the customer, won't see anything rendered in the page. However, there is a difference between this comment and this comment, this HTML comment. And that is that the liquid comment is not sent to the client at all, while the HTML comment is sent to the client, but it's just not rendered. So if I go here and view page source, I can look for HTML comment, and we can see the comment here. But the liquid comment itself, which should be above the hello world, doesn't show at all, because as this is a liquid comment, it stays in the server. So these comments, these liquid comments, are preferred if you want to add self-documentation or documentation to some parts of your code, because there is really no benefit of sending this to the client. Your page will have a slightly larger footprint, and your user won't benefit with that at all. Also, you may accidentally leak some information here in the comments, so it is better to keep them in the server whenever you can. Now let's delete all of this. I'll add a comment here by pressing Command and slash, or Control and slash if you're on Windows. This is a keyboard shortcut for quickly adding a comment in Visual Studio Code, and here I'm going to say string. A string is the first data type that we will explore here, so let's create a string by creating a variable here, myString. This will be equal to hello world. Now what is a string? A string is any sequence of text that is enclosed between either double quotes or single quotes, like this one over here. The text can be characters, it can be numbers, it can be special characters, or a combination of all of them, like this. Now, an important distinction to be made here is that if the contents of strings are numbers, like for example here, then Liquid will still treat it as a string. This is especially important at the time of doing comparison operations, because if we try to compare a string with a number to, for example, do something if one is greater than the other, we may end up with unexpected results. Later in the video, we'll see how we can convert from one data type to the other to handle situations like those. Now let's print here this string, my string here, and if I go to the page, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is working. The next data type that we're going to see are numbers. So here are number. This doesn't have much mystery to it. My number, this can be something like this. You just type the number, you don't have to use single quotes, double quotes, or any special character, just the number. And the number can be an integer, or it can be a floating point. So my floating point number, 123.5, and both of them will work fine. So let's print my number, a comma, my floating point number, and here I can see them like this. It's important to know, by the way, that Liquid doesn't add new lines if we just print the variable, so we have to add this manually. I'm going to add a BR element here, and this will force a line break. Next, let's see Booleans. So here, Boolean, this is basically a true or false type. So my Boolean, this can either be true or it can be false. In both cases, if I try to print it here, I'll just get the text. Let me add here a line break as well. I just get the false text here. Same if I try to print true. But where this becomes really useful is when we are dealing with comparisons and with conditionals. We'll see more of that later in this video. Now the next one we'll see is nil or null. So let me add a line break here, and nil or null. So we can declare this way. So my nil equals nil. And this extension that I have over here, this Shopify Liquid extension, automatically transforms this to null. I think it is this extension. But anyways, for practical purposes, they are both the same. If I try to print this, my nil, nothing shows up because this value is empty. However, where this is useful is if I try to, in a conditional, we haven't seen conditionals, we'll explore more of this in a moment, but I want to illustrate this example here. If I check for if undefined variable is equal to nil, let me print undefined variable is equal to nil. And over here, right, I forgot to close this. So here I see that undefined variable is equal to nil. If I were to put a different variable here, like let's say my number, now we don't see anything here. Again, nil and null are pretty much the same. They are just used to indicate that a value is empty. As undefined variable doesn't exist here, its value is considered empty, and therefore the code over here is executed. So this p tag and the content inside of it gets added to the HTML code. Okay, so the next data types that we'll see are data types that we cannot declare ourselves, but that we can access if they have been declared for us. And Shopify does that often. The first one will be array. So here I'll write array. And an array is basically a collection of values that are enclosed in a single variable. If you have programmed already in other programming languages, you are probably familiar with them in one way or the other. Now, if I try to declare an array here, so my array, in other programming languages, this is how you will declare them usually. But you already get an idea here that this will throw an error. If here I try printing this, I just won't see anything. However, Shopify declares a few arrays for us that we can access. One of those is product.tags. You can see that this didn't throw an error, but it still doesn't print anything. And the reason for that is that I'm in the home page. But if I go to a product page like this, we can see the product tags of this. So something to mention is that some of the variables that Shopify declares for us are contextual and depend on where you are trying to access them. Obviously, product.tags doesn't make sense if you are in the home page because it doesn't know what product you are referring to. But if you're in the product page, it knows what product you want to get the tags for. Anyways, this is an array, and you can see all the tags, they are grouped together here. So this doesn't make much sense. You could even think that this is a string. However, if here I try accessing the first element in the array, and arrays, by the way, start at index 0 and go on from there, we see premium here. If I try accessing the one in index 1, we'll see a snow, and so on. Also, arrays have the size property. This lets us know how many elements are in the array. Strings also have that property, by the way, so here I can say my string dot size, and I should see here 4 because this string has 4 characters. Anyways, arrays also let us loop through them. We'll see loops more in depth later in the video, but just so you see how you can loop through them. So for tag, in tags, and for here, and we can print here the tag. Let's add a new line here, right, in product.tags. And we can see all the tags that this product has. So there you have it. Even though we cannot declare arrays, we can access them if they've been provided by Shopify. There is, though, a workaround for declaring arrays. It only works for very specific circumstances, but we'll explore it anyways later in the video. Now let's cover the last data type, and you have already seen a preview of that. We are going to see the object data type. So this product.tags here, this product variable, I didn't declare it anywhere. This product is a variable provided to me by Shopify, and it is an object because I'm accessing a property of that object. So here I can say product.title, and I get the title of this product over here. And by the way, this is how all of this information is being rendered. It is accessing the different properties of the product object. Now, what properties do we have access in the product object? Well, we have all of these properties. I'll leave a link to this in the video description, but this is basically the documentation for all the objects that Shopify provides to us, including of course the product object, which we are just seeing right now. This is an example of it. And if you click on any of these properties, you can see a short description of what the property is about. We can't, by the way, declare objects, so there is no way for me to create, say, a product2 object and start adding properties to it. So we'll have to do with the objects that we have. There may be workarounds, but they usually don't work that well. Meta objects are kind of a workaround for this, but we'll see more of those in a future video. With those, we could create custom objects, but they have to be managed through the Shopify admin, and we cannot like declare a meta object from the code itself. We just can't access them. Anyways, now let's see a different way of declaring variables. We have previously seen that we can do so using assign, but this other method will make much more sense now that we've seen the different data types that we have available. So first, let's see what problem this solves. Let's say that I want to capture some HTML in a variable here. Let's say that I have div, and that inside this div, I want to have a p tag here, and it says hello product.title. Now let's print this. And here we can see that something gets printed, but not exactly what we wanted. Here I'm seeing hello and literally product.title in between the curly brackets. But I actually want the real product title here. So how can I do that? Well, there is a workaround for this, and that is the capture way of declaring a variable. So here I'll say capture HTML and end capture. And what this is doing is that anything we put inside this capture and end capture block will be the value of the HTML variable that we set in here. So let me do div p over here, hello, and then product.title, and close the p tag here. And now we see hello, the complete snowboard, which is the title of this product that we are seeing. So basically, by using capture, we can have HTML that inside of it is accessing variables. We can also have conditionals here, loop through arrays, and so on. So this is very powerful for capturing HTML inside of a variable. This will be treated as a string, by the way. So you can do any operation that you were able to do with a string. Like for example, I can say dot size, and I can see that it has 66 characters. Okay, so the next thing we'll see are conditionals. We saw a brief example of this a moment ago when we declared this conditional over here to check if undefined variable is equal to null. But let's create a more intentional example. So I'll delete all of this. And now let me first start by creating a variable, my variable, and this will be equal to 11. And then let's create a conditional. So if my variable is greater than 10, let me print variable greater than 10. Else, let me print variable not greater than 10. And we have to then close this with an end if. So this is basically a control statement. What we do here is if this variable, my variable is greater than 10, we are going to enter here, and everything that we write in here, we can write multiple statements or instructions here. So let's say something like another instruction. Everything we write in here will be executed if my variable is greater than 10. Otherwise, or else, everything that we write in here will be executed if my variable is not greater than 10. This else block, by the way, is optional. I can remove it, and this will still be valid and a valid if statement. However, what I cannot get rid of is this line over here, this if, nor this and if at the end. Now, if I save this, let's go to the browser and see what we get. So here I get variable greater than 10, and then another instruction. Here I can also add arbitrary liquid code, so I can say assign my nested variable. Let's say that this is equal to 20, and now let me print 20, or the value of my nested variable. So I can go here, and I can see a 20 here. Now if I make this a 9, for example, we will see that only this gets printed, so variable not greater than 10. Also, this my nested variable here is never declared in the second block, therefore it doesn't exist. So if I try printing it over here, I'll get nothing will show, because this variable is dependent on my variable being greater than 10. Another part of conditionals that is important is the else if statement, which in Liquid is written like this: else if everything as a single word, and then we can put here a second conditional. So I can say if my variable, else if my variable is greater than 5, then here I can say variable greater than 5. So it will only enter here if my variable is not greater than 10, so it has to fail this conditional, then it will check for this my variable is greater than 5. So that's why it is an else if. Let's save this, and here we get variable greater than 5. So it will not enter this else conditional unless everything else fails. We can have as many else if as we want, so I can say else if my variable is greater than 3, and I'll copy this, and I can say variable greater than 3. And now if I make my variable to be 4, we'll see that it did not enter the first conditional because we tried to check if the variable was greater than 10, which it isn't. It did not enter the second conditional because it is not greater than 5, but it did enter the third conditional because it is greater than 3. If I made it 2, then it will go to the last conditional, which actually should be now that the variable is not greater than 3, because it will only enter here if the variable is not greater than 3. Now let's see comparison operators. So while writing all of these conditionals, I've been using the greater than operator. So I'm comparing my variable with 10, and the relationship that I want between my variable and 10 is that my variable should be greater than 10 for it to pass this conditional. This is not the only operator we have here, so let's delete all of this. Let me close this conditional here. Let me just say here my variable is greater than 10, and let me add a comment, greater than. Now if I save this and I make this variable 20, we'll see here my variable is greater than 10. Now let's try with the less than operator. So if my variable is less than, let's say 10, I'll copy this. My variable is less than 10, and let's make this a 2. So here we will see that now my variable is less than 10 is what is being rendered in the page, instead of the text we had when the variable was greater than 10. So let's add a comment here, less than. We also have access to the equal operator. So equal, if my variable is equal to 10, my variable is equal to 10. So price of this had to be changed to be a 10, and now let's see here my variable is equal to 10. So this is working just fine. Now let's see greater than or equal to, and this, or this, I'm just going to copy this over here, and I'm going to add an equal sign to the right of this greater than sign. So my variable is greater than or equal to 10. And now both of these statements are true. If my variable is, no, sorry, both of these statements here are true. My variable is equal to 10, but my variable is also greater than or equal to 10. So we will see both things being printed over here. And as you can guess, we also have access to the less than or equal to comparison operator. So if I put this here and I change this greater with this less than, here I say less than, we see that the three of these statements are true at the same time because my variable is equal to 10. Now, if I make this an 11, we'll see that only these two are being true now. So my variable is greater than 10, this is true, and my variable is greater than or equal to 10. Both of these statements are true. And if I make it a 9, we get that my variable is less than 10, or that my variable is less than or equal to 10. Now, when we are dealing with the equal operator, we are not limited to working with numbers. We can also work with strings. So let me create another variable here, my string, and this will be hello. And now I can say if my string is equal to hello, let me just write my string is hello. And if I say this, I see my string is hello. But if I say that my string here now would be something else, like not hello, now this conditional doesn't evolve to true, and therefore we don't execute what's inside this block. And something else I mentioned earlier is that when we are creating a string, we have the option of setting its value to a number. But this number, as it is between single quotes, it will be treated as a string. So if I change my variable from 9, the number, to a string that has the value of 9, look at what happens here. We get a bunch of liquid errors because a comparison of a string with 10 failed. Therefore, you can see here that we cannot compare strings with numbers. So this is what I meant earlier when I said that you have to be careful with the type of your numbers in Liquid. Okay, now let's convert this back to a number. And here let's see the contains operator. So for this, I'm going to print product title, and I'm also going to print the product tags. We'll use both in a moment. So if I save this and I go to the browser, here I see the product title and the product tags, which, as we saw earlier, this is an array, but when we print it just like this, the name of the variable, we get them all grouped together, like if it was a single word. Now, for using contains, we can use this to check, in the case of a string, to check if it contains a subset of characters, and in the case of an array, to check if it contains a particular element. So first, let's see for a string, and let's go to say that if product title contains snowboard, then we can print here, this is a snowboard. If we go here, I see this is a snowboard. Now, in the case of the tags, I can say if product tags contains, let's see one of these tags, winter. I can print here, this is a winter product. And if I save this, I get this is a winter product and this is a snowboard. Now, if I wanted to, just to show you that we are actually checking for individual items, here I will copy sport winter, and if I try to check for this, we'll see that the last check, the product.tags contains sport winter, no longer enters here. This is no longer printed because even though they are grouped together here, tags are actually separated. You can see the separation here by checking for the letter that's in uppercase. Now, and I almost forgot, but we also have the not equal operator. So if my string is not equal to hello, I'm going to say my string is not hello. So here I save this, my string here is not hello, so I should see here my string is not hello. Now for all these instances of comparison operators, there is always a way to negate them. So the negation of greater than would be less than or equal to. The negation of less than would be greater than or equal to. The negation of equal would be not equal here. But how do we negate contains? We cannot here say not contains or doesn't contain. And if you have programmed in other programming languages, you may try to do something like this. Adding an exclamation mark here to negate something, maybe wrapping this in parentheses, but none of this is valid in Liquid. Instead, we have to rely on the unless tag. So this is like a reverse if or an opposite if. So unless product tags contains premium, we are going to say this product doesn't contain the premium tag. And we have to make sure we close this appropriately instead of and if and unless. And if I save this, I'm not going to see anything because this product contains the premium tag. However, if I go to the home page and let's search for a product that doesn't contain this, like this selling plants ski wax, I can see here this product doesn't contain the premium tag. Also, unless supports an else statement. So here I can say else this product contains the premium tag. So if I save this, here this won't change, but if we go back to the other product we were seeing a moment ago, I think it was this one, here we see this product contains the premium tag. So this is how you will use the unless tag. You are not limited to just using contain here. You can use any conditional. So unless my variable is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to say my variable is greater than 10. Otherwise, I'm going to say my variable is not greater than 10. So here my variable is 9, so I should be seeing my variable is not greater than 10. And now if I make this 11, my variable is greater than 10, because we are saying unless my variable is less or equal to 10. So you can always try creating this in natural language and you will get an idea of what this is doing. Okay, so now let's see logical operators. What this let us do is that we will be able to chain conditions together. So for example, let's say that I want to print a message if I'm in a snowboard page and the snowboard is an affordable one. So let's say that I do if product title contains a snowboard and product price, let's say that an affordable snowboard is below $650. So I'm going to say 650, and I have to add 2 zeros here because the price in Shopify is saved as cents. So instead of dollars, I'm saying that this is 65,000 cents, which is $650. So here now I'll say this is an affordable snowboard. If I save this, let's go first to the complete snowboard here. This one is $699, and here I don't see the message. Now, if then I go to this snowboard hydrogen, here I see this is an affordable snowboard because it is below $650. Now, if I replace this AND with an OR, it will enter here if either this condition is met or this condition is met. So here we won't see any change, but now, if I go to the previous snowboard that I checked, the completed snowboard here, I'll see that this is an affordable snowboard. And I will even see this message if I go to the ski wax, because even though its title doesn't contain the word snowboard as we specified in the first condition here, its price is below $650, so we enter the condition and the conditional anyways, and we will print this message here. We can change as many conditionals as we need to, but there is a catch in the way they are evaluated in Liquid. And to illustrate this, let's modify this conditional, and let's say that a snowboard can either be something where the product title contains the word snowboard or product type is equal to snowboard. And then we want to check if the price is also below $650. So the idea here will be, is it a snowboard? Yes. And then is its price below $650? Yes. Then this is an affordable snowboard. Now, if I go back to the page, here I don't see any message because this is not a snowboard by any of the conditions we specified here. But if I go back and now open the completed snowboard here, we are seeing that this is an affordable snowboard message, even though we specified that the price must be below $650. So why is this happening? Maybe if I reduce the price a little, that will fix it. So let's say if it is below $10, no, we are still seeing the message. Even if I make it that the price should be below 100, or sorry, $1, because these are cents, we still get this an affordable snowboard, as if this condition was being ignored. And the reason for this is because of the way Shopify evaluates this expression over here. So let me copy this, and let's write a comment, and let's try to evaluate this ourselves. So basically Shopify is going from right to left, evaluating each condition and then resolving them. So the first step it will do is it will take this product price. Product price is below $1 or 100 cents. In the case of this product, false. So then in the second line, it will say false and product type equals snowboard. Product type equals snowboard is true. True and false. What do we get when we say true and false? True and false is false. So we get here false. Now product title contains a snowboard. This is true. So here we will have true or false. And based on logical operations, what do we get when we have true or false? Well, the result of this will be true. And this is why it is entering here, even though we don't intend that to happen. In other programming languages, we will solve this by adding parentheses here. So I will be able to do something like this, and that will solve this in theory. But in Liquid, you are already seeing that this is not how it works. We get here this red underline indicating that this is invalid. And if I save this, I won't see any change here. This won't see, Shopify will not take this as valid Liquid and therefore will not update anything in the page. So what can we do about this? What we can do is have this as a separate variable. So let's say that I create is a snowboard, and I say that this is by default true, sorry, by default false, and then I do this conditional here, and if it enters here, we will say that this is true. And then I do is a snowboard, and its price is below $1. And we see here that the message is no longer being printed. Now, if I were to change this 100 or $1 to be $700 or 70,000 cents, and I save this, I'm going to see this is an affordable snowboard for this product, and if I go to other products, I'm not going to see, or I should not be seeing the message. So this one over here, the compare at price snowboard, I don't see the affordable message. Okay, so the last tag that we'll check is the case tag, which in some programming languages is referred to as switch. So here I'm going to say case, and let's say product.product.type. Let's end case here at the end. And now what we can do here is have several of these when blocks, and we can check for the value of the product type, like for example snowboard, and we are able to print something if the value of this product type is exactly what we have here. So let's say this is a snowboard. If I save this, and if I go to the complete snowboard here, I get this is a snowboard. But if I go to the home page again and open this ski wax product, I don't see anything. Now I went ahead in Shopify admin and filled the product type for some products. So basically just open the product here. If this field was empty, I just type something here, or if I had already defined it, I just selected it from that list and click save. I did this off camera to not waste too much time on that. But anyways, here now I can say when the value here is a ski wax, I'll copy this here, say this is a ski wax, and let's do that again. When the type here is a gift card, this is a gift card. Now if I save this, here I see this as ski wax, and for a gift card here I see this is a gift card. Now if I go to a page that doesn't have this defined, nothing will show here. What we can do here is have an else tag, which will be executed if none of these tags, if nothing enters none of these when statements. So for example here I can say no product type, or no known product type. If I save this, in the home page, as there is no product type at all, I see here no known product type. Although something better we could do is to wrap all of this in an if statement. So if product type, and that way we will only enter here if there is an actual product type. That way, if the product itself, like if there is not a product itself here, so if this is undefined, it is not that this is not a known product type, it is that there is no product type at all. So for example, I think I didn't add a product type to this snowboard over here, or perhaps I did. Right, product type is defined but it's blank. What I can do if I didn't want that to enter there is if product type is different than blank, then now we are not entering here at all. Even if we are in a product page, if the product.type is empty, we will not enter there at all. But here, this is a snowboard, it's working just fine. Now, if I go to the oxygen one here, and I say that the product type is some snowboard, and I save this. Now, if I go to oxygen here, I see no known product type, which is what we have defined just here. So I wanted to quickly mention why I used blank here instead of nil or null. So if we go to Liquid's documentation here, where a string is being defined, we see this tip here that says you can check whether a string is empty with the blank object. So this is why I compared it with blank instead of nil. Nil is for undefined values, but if we want to check whether a string is empty or not, we will use blank. And we know that that product type is a string because here in the documentation for the product object, here type is mentioned to be a string. So that's why I compared it with blank. And the last thing regarding conditionals that I want to mention is the truthy and falsy concept. So far we've been working with conditions where its value can be resolved to either be true or false. Like for example, product title contains a snowboard. This is either true or it is false. Product type is equal to a snowboard. This is either true or it is false. However, not every time we will be able to convert things to be Boolean. And this is where the truthy and falsy concept comes to play. For example, an empty array, if we put an empty array as a condition in an if statement, that will be considered as true, the same as the true value here, or a zero, or an integer, or a float, or an array, or even an empty array. Basically everything unless it is false and nil. So let's see an example. Here I can say if product title, then I'm going to print product title. And let's append, this is the product title. So if I come here, I refresh this, I see here, this is the product title and the title of the product. But if I go to the home page, I won't see anything here. Now, if I remove this conditional here, we will be seeing this message. This is the product title everywhere, even if the product title was empty. So this is why this conditional is important. And as you can see, when we print the title here, this is a string. So this is why this truthy and falsy concept is important, because we can use other values aside from Booleans in conditionals, and they will follow these rules stated in this table over here. I'll leave the link to this in the video description. Okay, now that we've seen conditionals, let's see looping. So I'm going to delete everything in this file, and now let's save, and let me go to a collections page. So here I'm in collections all, so this collection should have all the products. You can manually navigate to this URL if you're in a different team that doesn't have this particular link in the navbar. And now let's loop through all the products. So I'm going to use a for loop. We saw a preview of that a moment ago, but this is basically a way of going through every element in an array. So I'm going to say for product in collection.products. This collection object is an object that Shopify provides to us if we are in a collection page. And now let me just print here product.title. Let's save. And I see every product that is a member of this collection. Now let's start doing things in this loop. So you saw earlier in the video that we are able to use Liquid for having dynamic parameters, or things change dynamically in the attributes, or for HTML elements as well. So let's say that I wanted the first product in this array to be green. So what I can do is this style here, say the color, if for loop dot first, then I'm going to say that it is green. And actually we should put this color inside of the if statement here. And now here we can see that the first product, the gift card, has a green color to it. We can also do this, so let's add more space here. And let's say that else if for loop dot last, we can say color, let's say orange. And we have an orange color here. And now let's say that I wanted to add the number to the side of each element here. I can do something like this, for loop dot index, and that will tell me each number over here. We could also use index 0, so you will use either index or index 0 depending on what you're trying to do. Index, as it says here, is a one-based index of the current iteration, and index 0 is the same, but it starts at 0 because, as we saw earlier, arrays are indexed at 0. So you can loop and access the index either in a zeroth way or in a more natural way. Something else we can do is that we can nest for loops. So I can say for tag in product.tags, and let me close the loop here, and now I can print every tag here. I could enclose this in a unordered list here, and then say tag, and let's see how this looks like. So we can see the tags here for every product that has tags, and maybe I could add a title here, so tags. But now we have this tags title, but nothing is showing below, so we can enclose all of this in a conditional if product.tags, and I put this here. We refresh, but we are still seeing these tags over here, and the reason for this is because of the Truthy and falsy thing we saw a moment ago. Product.tags is an empty array for products that don't have tags, like this gift card. So we have to, and an empty array evaluates to true in a conditional. So what we have to do here is to explicitly tell it what we are looking for here. So I'm going to say dot size has to be greater than 0. That way it will explicitly check if the tags array has at least one element. If it doesn't, then it will show this tags heading below. Okay, so now let's say that I needed to associate the product index with each one of these tags. So for all the tags of product 1, I want data product index to be 1. For all the tags of product 2, I want data product index to be 2. The reason for this may be that I need to do something with it in JavaScript or something like that. I will, for making this example more visual, I will print the product index here in text, so we don't have to open the developer tools and see that there. But the idea will be the same of how to get this. So here, if I try printing product for loop.index, and by the way, let me change this index 0 to the regular index now. If I save this, I'm going to get here 1, 2, 3, but all of these should have the same product index, in this case 2. Why is this? Well, this for loop variable is always associated to the closest for loop, which in this case is this tag loop. So if we wanted to access the parent for loop, we will have to do something like parent loop and then index. And if we had 3 for loops nested, we could do for loop, parent loop again, and parent loop again as much as we needed to. In this case, we only have one nested for loop, so doing parent loop just once will work. And now here we can see that the product index is always the same for all the tags of a single product, as we expect this to behave. Something else we can do when we are dealing with for loops in Liquid is that we can add an else clause. So I'm going to create an empty collection here to showcase this. So I'm going to name this empty collection. It will be a manual collection, and I will just not add any product. To get the URL for this, I'll click here on edit, and the URL is this over here, so I'll copy this, and then I'll go to the store here, and I'm going to paste this. And we see empty collection, and it has a message, no products found. Now, if we wanted to also show a message for this here, we could do something like this. If collection.products.size equals 0, we can print this collection has no products, and this will work. This collection will show this message, but the collection that has products will not show this message. But there is an easier way to do this. I'll cut this over here, and what I'll do is that I'll add an else tag here, and I'm going to paste this. So let me remove this, and now if I save, Here, I still see my message, even if I refresh the page, the message is still there. And in the collection that has products, we don't see the message. So this is a way of showing a message if what you're looping through has no values at all. Something else we can do with Liquid is to put here a limit parameter. And what this will do is that it will only show n products in this for loop. In this case, 5. So if I save this and I go here, I will only see up to the 5th product. And it even considers this the last product because we had a conditional that changed the color of the last product to be orange, which in this case is the 5th product. I can also pass it an offset. So what this will do is that it will start the for loop after n of these elements. So if I pass 0 here, it will start as normal. If I pass 1, it will start in the 2nd element. If I pass 2, it will start on the 3rd element, and so on. So if I pass 4 here, it should start on the 5th element, this one here. So this will be the first element once I hit save in the code editor. So the collection is no more liquid. If I press save here, it should appear now at the top. Let's see, the collection is no more liquid. And now the last element is the inventory not track snowboard. So this is working just fine. Now some other liquid tags that may come useful when we are dealing with loops are break and continue. So for this, let's go over here in this loop that is going through the tags, and let's say here that we wanted to stop the loop immediately after we found the sport tag. So I cannot use for this the limit parameter because the sport tag is not always in the same position. Here it is the 2nd item, but here it is the 4th item. So what I can do instead is that I can add a conditional here, if tag equals sport, then break. And what this will do is that it will end the for loop prematurely. So if I save this, here we can see that sport is always the last item in the cases where that tag is present. Something else we can do is that instead of break, we use continue. And what this will do is that it will skip this tag at all, this iteration at all. So if I move this to the top instead, it will continue to the next iteration of this loop, and it will not execute anything below this. So this line won't be printed. If we go here, we can see that now a sport is missing everywhere it was before. Something else we can do is loop through arbitrary range of numbers. So let's say that I wanted to print a message 5 times. I can do for I in, then 1 to 5 and 4, and here I can say hello world. And here I'm going to see hello world printed 5 times. I can also print the value of this I variable. And here we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the same range we specified here. But this is not the index. The index still can be found under forloop.index, which if we print this, nothing will change. However, I doesn't have to necessarily match the index. To prove this, I will change this to be from 11 to 15. I'm still going to be printing this 5 times, but now the value of I starts at 11 and ends up at 15. A limitation for loops have in Liquid is that they are limited to 50 iterations per page. So if we had more than 50 products in our stores, for example, we wouldn't be able to loop through them all in a single page. Now, for certain objects, such as collection.products, which is the one that we are using, and all of this, we are able to use the Paginate tag here to navigate to different pages and be able to see all the products that way. So let's see how we can implement this in our store. Now, even though this collection here, if I print the products and the size, even though this collection doesn't have 50 products, I can go here, we only have 13 products in this collection, we can still paginate through this because we can specify a page size when paginating. So I'm going to delete all of this. So only the pagination products are printed, and now I'm going to say paginate collection.products. I'm going to say by 10 or by 5 and paginate. And now here I'm going to loop through the product. So for product in collection.products, I'm going to print the product title. So if I save this, here I'm seeing the first 5 products. And now, how do we navigate to the next page? Because yes, we know that it is being paginated, but there is no button here to go to the next page. Well, for this, we can use the paginate object, which, similar to the for loop object, we have access to this object when we are inside a paginate loop or a paginate block. It has all of these properties, so we could build a pagination navigation here with this. Like for example, here, this next property is of type part, and here we can see its title, its URL, and whether it is a link or not. However, for simple cases, we can use the default pagination filter, and we can render a decent pagination that works out of the box. So let's do that. I'll say paginate default pagination here. I'm going to save this, and now if I go to the page here, I have this pagination. It is unstyled, by the way, but we could take care of that through CSS if we wanted to. Now I can click on next here, and I'm on page 2. And you can see, if you were paying attention here, that the items changed. And now I can go to page 3, and likewise the items changed as well. I can click also here to the first page, and I'm in the first page. Now let's see filters. We've been using them throughout this video, but we haven't formally explored them, so let's go through that. I'm going to delete all of this. Now first, what is a filter? A filter is a way of transforming an input or value into another value based on certain conditions. So there are some filters that are native of Liquid, but then there are some others that are added by Shopify. So as Liquid is a template engine that you could use in other projects, like I think 11t supports using Liquid, for example, you there can use also the native Liquid filters, but the ones that are specific to Shopify, well, you cannot use them there because they were defined here in Shopify. So with that being said, let's start with the math specific filters. So let's say that I have a number here, my number, and let's say that I have this as 10. So if we wanted to do arithmetic operations with this number, let's say that I wanted to add 5 to it. In a regular programming language, you will be able to do something like this. Assign my new number is equal to my number plus 5. Here we can see already that we have an error, and if I try printing this, I see 10 because this operation did not happen. So how can I add 5 to my number? Well, I can use the plus 5 filter, and now I see 15 here. If I wanted to decrease this by 5, I will use the minus filter, and now I have 5 here. If I wanted to multiply by 5, I will use the times filter, and I have here 50. And if I wanted to divide by 5, I will use the divide by filter, and here I have 2. Now earlier we said that there were ways of transforming a string that contained a number into a number itself. So here I have my number, and I made this a string now because it is between single quotes. And if I try doing something like this, so say if my number is greater than 5, let's print my number is greater than 5. If I save this, I see here an error, comparison of a string with 5 failed. If I wanted to convert this to a number, I can do the following here. I can say assign my new number is equals to my number, and then I can do any arithmetic operation here, and that will convert it to a type number. Now, what if I want to keep this as a 10? So maybe I don't want to add anything to it or subtract anything from it. I can still do +0, and that will convert it to a number. So here, I'll change this to my new number. And now we can see that this worked fine. We no longer get the error, and if I print my new number here, I get the 10 that I have here. But this condition no longer fails. Another filter for numbers that we have access to is the modulo one. So we can use this to tell whether a number is even or not. So let's say that I want to do if my new number modulo 2 is equal to 0, then I want to print here even, otherwise odd. And then let's close this if statement, and we can see here that we are having an error, and this is important to know. You cannot use filters in the body of in the declaration, of a conditional or in a loop. You instead have to create an intermediary variable here, so assign modulo of my number, for example, and I'll copy this, and now I can say if modulo of my number is equal to 0, then even, otherwise odd. So here we can see even, and if I make this let's say an 11, we shall see odd being printed here. Correct. So basically modulo is the remainder that you get when you divide this 11 by 2. So if the remainder of that is different than 0, that means that the number is odd, or otherwise it will be 0, and that means that the number is even. Something else we can do, let's create a different variable here, my app's number, and let's equal this to -11. If I print this, I get obviously -11 because that's what I assigned this variable to. However, if I wanted to get the absolute value of this for some reason, I can use the abs filter of absolute value, and I get now an 11. We also can round numbers with filters, so let's say that I have a variable here, my rounded number, and let's equal this to 10.4. If I print this, my rounded number, I'll see there at 10.4, but if I say round here, I see a 10 now, because it is this 10.4 is closer to 10 than it is to 11. However, if I make this at 10.6, I get here an 11. And if I make this at 10.5, which is right in the middle, I get an 11 because it defaults to moving upwards. However, if I want to force this to go down, I can use floor, which will go to 10. And likewise, if I have here a 10.6, sorry, a 10.4, but I want to go to the next one nonetheless, I can use seal, and this will be moved to 11 now. And the last two filters for numbers that we'll see are at most and at least. So let's create a value here, my capped value, and I'll say that this is 100. if I print this here, my cap value, I get 100. But now I can say that this at most can be 80. And now here I get an 80 because this goes above this 80. However, if I make this a 60, I will get the actual number instead of the cap value. Likewise, I can use at least, and I can say that this can't go below 70. So now here I see a 70, but if I make this 100, I'll get the exact 100 value that I assigned to this variable here. And now that we've seen numeric filters, let's see a string filter. So I'll delete all of this, and let's start by creating a variable here. My string, this will be equal to hello world. And let's print this, my string, and I should see this over here. And now let's start applying filters to this. So some of the most common ones are, for example, uppercase, if we wanted this to be in uppercase, downcase, if we wanted this to be all in lowercase. And for this to make more sense, let's say hello world here, like this. And if we remove this filter here, you will see that this change I made is showing the first word in uppercase. We can also use capitalize here. Another filter we can use is append here. So some extra text, if I put this way, then I get it like this. I can also put variables here, so I can say my other string, and this will be equal to this some extra text. And now I can pass this variable here, and I can see hello world, some extra text. We can also chain filters, so if I wanted to here then put everything here in downcase, I can do that, but the order matters here. If instead I put downcase at the beginning, and let's say that I add some extra here, will be in uppercase. Even though I use the downcase filter, I appended this after using the downcase filter. Therefore, this will remain in uppercase. This extra text here will remain in uppercase. Unless, of course, I add downcase again here. Another filter we can find useful is the strip filter. So let's say here that this is my string with white space, and here I'm going to say hello, this has white space. And if I print this, my string with white space, and to make it obvious that it has white space, let's add an exclamation point at the end with append. I'll see here that it has white space. In HTML, you actually, even though you add more than white space, you get at most one. They are continuous, so this is why not all of them got rendered here. But anyways, if I wanted to remove all of this trailing white space, what I can do is that I can pass the strip filter here, and now I don't have the trailing white space that I had before. If we want to see a comparison of how that looks like with and without the strip filter here, this is it. Here you can see that it has this white space here, but now here it doesn't. Another useful filter related to this one is the strip HTML. So let's say that I have my HTML text here, and this is a p tag with the style color red. I actually have to use single quotes here, color red. It says hello, and if I print this, my HTML text, I get this text in red. However, what if I don't want this text in red? What if instead I want this hello text only, but the way I'm getting, or the source of this hello text, comes with the HTML embedded? Well, I can remove those tags by using the strip HTML filter, and now I get my plain text as I needed it. We can also use truncate and truncate words if we want to reduce the length of a text. So let's write a variable here, my long string, and here I'll write this is some very long text that will be trimmed. So I print this here, my long string, and let's say that I want only the first 20 characters. So I can say truncate 20, and I get this is some very, and then an ellipsis. I can pass here a second argument with the character that I want to use at the end. If I don't want these three dots here, I can maybe say that I want a question mark, for example, and I'll get just that at the end. Now let's say that instead of this, I want the first 4 words. I can say truncate words and pass 4 here, and I get this is some very, that way I don't get that abrupt ending where there may be some incomplete characters from the next word. We saw truncate here. Something to notice is that we may have to use it in combination with a strip HTML sometimes, because the text that you are getting comes in HTML. This happens, for example, if you get the content of an article and you want to maybe show a preview with only the first 50 characters or something like that. So here, let me add some extra text inside this p text over here to show this example better. And let's say that I want to render my HTML text and truncate to the first 35 characters. If I render this, I get hello some. But if we count this, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The white space is another 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters. So where are the others? Well, the others are all of these right here. So to get the actual first 35 characters, I have to first pass it through the strip HTML filter and then through truncate, and now I get all of this. Actually, this text has less than 35 characters, so to illustrate it better, let me add more here, and here we get the actual first 35 characters of this text instead of getting this part of the HTML, which, by the way, will be malformed because we wouldn't be getting this p tag at the end. Another useful one is new line to BR. So let's say that I have here my multi-line text, and I say here, this is the first line, this is the second line, and this is the third line. If I try printing this, I will get everything in a single line. And this is where this filter is useful. I can say new line to BR, BR being this tag over here, which forces a line break. And here I see that now I have my text separated into different lines, like I have it over here. And now the last two filters I want to show are replace and remove. So let's say my text here will be equal to this. Now, if I print this, my text, I'll see hello, some extra text, some extra text. Now, I can say replace, I can say that text will be replaced with string. And here I see some extra string, some extra string. Now, if I wanted to only replace the first occurrence of this, I can say replace first. And here, this is a string, but this is text. And conversely, we have also replace last, which does, as you can infer, replace the last occurrence of text with a string here and leaves the first one as it was. Now, we can also use remove, which doesn't receive a second parameter here, and instead we can remove all the occurrences of a word in a string. So here we are removing text from this, so now we get hello some extra. Likewise, we can use remove first and remove last to get the effects that you can expect. So the first text here is removed, but the last one is kept. And if I say remove last, then the first text here is kept, but the last one is not. And even though I mentioned that the replace and remove filters were the last ones that we will see for strings, the next filter serves as a connection of string filters and the next type of filters that we will see, array filters. This filter is a split and it will help us create an array. This is what I meant earlier in the video when I said that even though we cannot create an array directly, there is a workaround for it. So let's say that I have this variable here, my numbers, and I make this 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if I try to loop through this, so for number in my numbers, and I try printing this number here, I will get 1, 2, 3, 4 printed as a single string, as a single sequence of characters. But I instead want each number printed in its own line. So what I can do here is use the split filter, which if I don't pass any parameter, it splits by a white space. But if I pass it one here, which is the character it should use for splitting, in this case the comma, if I pass this, then we will get an array with 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is the result we have now, and we have effectively created an array through this. Now this is very powerful too, because we are not limited to creating an array of simple objects here. We can create something more complex. So let's say that I wanted to print the name of all the 3 languages used in the web, and that I wanted to color each one of those texts with the prominent color of its logo. So the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And now here, the HTML logo has orange as its prominent color, the CSS logo has blue as its prominent color, and the JavaScript logo has yellow as its prominent color. So what I'm doing here is that I'm splitting this into an array of 3 strings here. So we have HTML orange, CSS blue, and JavaScript yellow. But you may notice here that we are separating this with these pipe characters here, and you will see why in a moment. So here, let's say language, and if I print the language here, we'll get each language in its independent line, and that's fine. But now what we can do is language name here will be language split, and here I can pass the pipe operator and then say that I want the first item, and then language color will be language split the pipe again, say that I want the last item instead this time. So now I can say style color equals language color, and here I'll say language name. And if I save this, now I have each one here with the color that I specified here. So you can specify as much of a data that is as complex as you need it to be. But keep in mind that even though this works, it is not the best thing to work with. You may see that this is pretty brittle and can break at any moment. But as we don't have something better, if you really need to have arrays of this type, well, this is how you create them. This will become more powerful when we learn how to create form controls for merchants, a merchant being the person who administers the content in the store, when we learn to create form controls for them to add content to the store, because sometimes they will need to add something that is in the form of an array. And by adding a string like this, we tell them what format we need it to be in. And then when they add something like this, we will be able to extract the data in the format that we needed to create the HTML that we want to create. Okay, so now let's see the array filter. So I'll delete all of this and let's create an array, products, and this will be equal to collection.products, which is the easiest array we have access to at the moment. So let's say that we wanted to get all the product titles here. So product titles, this will be equal to products, and here we can use the map filter and we can pass it the name of a property and we will get an array with only the value of those properties. So unlike map in a language like JavaScript where you can return an arbitrary object for each item in the array, here map only lets you access a property and get its value. So you will go from products, which is an array of product objects, to now product titles here, which will be an array of strings where each string is a product title. So let's print this product titles. And you can see here all the product titles joined together. We can, to make this look better, let's perhaps go for product title in product titles, and let's print the product title here. And this is what we get. Now, what if we wanted to print this joined by a dash? We can do product titles and join. This will join every item in the array by anything that we put in here. So let's say a white space, a dash, and another white space. So they are not all that tightly grouped together. And this is what we get now. Every product separated by a dash. Another filter we have access to is the reverse filter. So here I can say reverse, and we can see here that gift card is the first product and the videographer snowboard is the last one. If I save this, we'll see that the videographer snowboard is now the first product and gift card is the last product. The next few filters, we have already seen them, but let's formally introduce them. So product titles first, let's copy this, we have last and size. And if we save this, we have the first item, which is this one because the array is reversed, gift card, the last item here, and the size of this array. We can also use for these filters in particular dot notation. So first, last, and size, and in all these cases they will work. This is useful because if you remember from earlier in the video, I mentioned that we can also use filters when specifying the condition in an array, so in an if statement, sorry. So if I would try to do something like if product titles size is greater than 5, and I save this, we already are seeing that this throws an error, and here this won't show anything. But if we use dot notation for this, now this changes. And we here see that test is being printed because the size of this array, as we see, is 13 here. So you can use this dot notation if you need to access first, last, or size in a conditional. Something else we can do is sort. So let me comment all of this here. And now let's go for product in products here and and now let's print product title and let's print its price. So for this to work, if you recall from earlier, price is in cents, and even though that will work, let's format this in a friendlier, in a more user-friendly way. So let's use the money filter. Money is a Shopify-specific filter, by the way. And now I can see each item with its price. Now let's say that I wanted to sort the items by their price. I can do that. So let's say price sorted items here. And let's say products sort by price. Here I pass the property that I want to sort by. And by the way, I have to use price sorted items here. And now I see that the cheapest item is at the top and the most expensive item is at the bottom. While previously, if I look through products, this has no particular order. The most expensive item is at the third position here in this array. And we can also sort a regular array. So let's say that I have here all prices here and products, and I'm going to map the price property. If I print this, so let's look through all of this, all prices, and let's print price here. I'll see the price in cents. Let's format this to money. And we get the price of every product, but this is not sorted. If I pass here sort, and don't specify any property because this is an array of numbers, then we get this sorted by default. The same will happen if it was an array of strings. It will sort it out alphabetically. Now something else we can do with filters too is get the sum of all of these values. So sum of prices will be all prices sum, and we can say total of all items sum of prices. And let's format this with money as well. And if I save, here we see that this number is the sum of all of these other numbers. Now let's say that I wanted to find an item in an array. How will I do that? Well, for this we have the where filter. So let's say snowboard, and then we want to find a particular snowboard. So let's go to products, and we will use for this the where filter. And what we will do here is that the title should be equal to the complete snowboard, and this will return an array. However, we know that there is only one item, one product that has this name. So let's use the first filter now to get that item and to be able to access its properties. So let's say a snowboard the title, and then a snowboard the price. It's formatted with money, and if I save this, I get the complete snowboard with its price, and this matches what we have over here. It is to be mentioned here that the match should be exact, so we cannot say something like only match for a snowboard. If I do this, nothing will show, because this is not a partial match. It should be an exact match, and we cannot use something like contains here. That will fail. So it is not as powerful as something you will be able to do in, say, JavaScript or another proper programming language, but it is what we have access to here. And lastly, let's say that we wanted to get all the unique tags that we have for the products over here. One way to do this is to go through all the products of our product in products, and now an inner loop here for tagging tags, and let's start creating an array with these tags. So tags will be equal to an empty array, and now here I'll say tags will be equal to tags, and I'll append this tag, and I'll append a white space, or let's append 2 white spaces because some tags may have a white space. So this way, when I split this later, I won't accidentally split other tags. We could use some other separator if we wanted to, but I think this will do for this example. So now, if I print tags here, let's see, there appears to be an issue, right? So product.tags here, we see all the tags, but let's say that we wanted to only show unique tags here, so we don't want repeated values here. What we can do is that I can say split by this value that I used over here to get an array, and then I can say unique, and this is a filter that will remove all repeated elements from an array. Now I can once again split this by white space, and we have, see, right, we can join this by white space here, and we have a list separated by white space of all the tags that are available for the products in the page. And this was the last non-Shopify specific filter we'll cover in this video. All the filters going forward will be specific to Shopify. However, before continuing, I want to show you here the documentation for the filters, because even though we covered a lot of them, there are still a few that, even though they are not used that often, it is useful that you know that they exist. So you can go through this documentation in depth and check each one of them, maybe write a little example yourself so you know how they work. And by the way, here when you click on one of these categories at the top, if it doesn't have the word Shopify here, that means that it is not a Shopify specific category of filters. So these array filters, for example, are not attached to Shopify. You can use them in any liquid environment. Meanwhile, if I click on money here, this is specific to Shopify. So if you use liquid somewhere else, this will not be available. Okay, so let's close this. And now let's go to the code here. Let's delete all of this. And the first filter that we'll see is JSON. So we can use this to print a properly formatted JSON. And one of its uses is for debugging, if you want to see what properties are available for an object, and if the value that you're trying to access is even there. It can also serve if you want to send a JSON to the client to consume it through JavaScript and do something with it. So let's see how we can use this filter. So from this collection, I'm going to say products, and I'm going to access the first product, and I'm just going to put here JSON. And if I go to the page here, I can see a JSON with all of the properties of this product. Now, not every object supports using the JSON filter, and you'll just have to try and see for the object you're working with at the moment to see if it works with that property. For example, shop doesn't support the JSON filter, so here it says JSON not allowed for this object, even though the object itself is populated. So for example, I can say shop.name here, and I'll get the name of the shop printed here. The next filter we're going to check is the default filter. So for this, I'm going to go to the admin dashboard here, and here I'm going to say this is the hydrogen collection for the description of this collection over here. And then for the empty collection, I will not fill this field. And now, if here I try to print collection.description, and I go to hydrogen, this is the hydrogen collection over here. But then if I go to empty collection, I see nothing. Now the default filter lets me put here a default value if this value returns a falsy value or an empty value. So here I can say this is a default description. And we can see here just that. Another filter that can be useful is the highlight filter. So here, let's say that I have this is some text with more text, and that I want to highlight here the word text. So I can use the highlight filter and do just that. If I save this, here we see that text is in bold. And if I check the HTML of this, the word that I'm highlighting here, text, is inside this strong element with the class of highlight. So if I need to style this differently, I can by targeting it through CSS. So for example, I can do style here and then highlight and change the background to yellow. And that will work. And a filter you'll often see being used is the date filter. So here in the documentation, we can refer to this to see what type of formatting we can pass to format a date. This is from the Ruby documentation, and to give you a bit of context about why it is using the Ruby formatting is because Liquid, if we go to the open source repository, is written in Ruby. So that's where this comes from. Anyways, going back to our code base here, let's say that I'm writing this copyright and I want to print here the current year, because that's something that most sites have at the footer, right? So I can say now and pass date, and then let's see how I can get from now, which is a special value that gets me the current date. Let's format this to get the current year. So here I can pass this percentage sign and a y, and I get copyright 2023. Now let's say that I wanted to print the date for some reason in this format of year, month, and day. I can do so by, let's go to the docs here to see how we can search for this. So here, this is month. I can pad it the way I want to. I can either blank pad it, so the one here has a white space before it, so it is always 2 characters wide when there's a single digit or when there are 2 digits. We can use no padding or have a 0 as padding. Let's just use the 0 as padding. And for day, here we can get the day. Let's see. Over here, we can, very similar to what we just saw, we can have it with 0 as padding, no padding at all, or with a blank space as padding. I'm just going to keep it with 0 as padding here. And if I go to the page here, I get the date printed in this format. Now let's see color filters. These filters will let us manipulate a color in ways like making a color darker or lighter, mixing colors together, checking the contrast ratio of a color against another, changing the format of a color from like hexadecimal to RGB or vice versa, and other useful operations. So first, let's start here by adding this swatch class over here, which will let us better visualize the colors that we are adding. I added this display block important because the theme that I'm using here, done, adds a display none to elements that don't have anything inside of them. And as we'll see here, this div will not have anything inside of it. We will just use it to set a background color and visualize the color itself, and we are working with it. So here, let's say that the background color initially will be white. So let's see here. And as a matter of fact, let's set this in a variable instead. So background color, and I'll put here background color. If I save this, I should see a white circle here. And now let's say that I want to make this color a bit darker. I can say color darken, and I can here specify by what amount, by what percentage I want to darken this color. So let's start at 20, and here I get this light gray, which I can keep increasing. For example, to 50%, I should get a normal gray here, a middle gray. And if I increase it all the way to 100%, I should get black. And likewise, let's say that now I make this color be black, so this, and that I want to lighten the color, so color lightened, and let's start at 20%. I get this slightly lighter gray, and then at 50% we get the gray that we had previously, and then at 100% we end up getting white again. And of course this can work for any other color, not just necessarily black and white. Like for example, if I use here red, I can lighten this color by 20%, and I get this lighter red. I can then increase this to 30%, and the color will keep getting lighter and lighter until we eventually reach white, which is at about 50% for the case of red. Now let's say that we wanted to mix some colors together. We can also do that. So here I'm going to copy this below, and now I'm going to rename this to color 1. Then I'm going to copy this and name this to color 2, and this one will be blue, and the one above here is red. So let's say that I want to mix color 1. Now I'm going to use the color mix filter, and I'm going to pass the other color that I want to mix color 1 with, which in this case is color 2. And now this receives a second parameter here, which is by what amount I want to mix them both together. So if we start at 50%, we should get purple. But if we then set this to 0%, we should get here a blue. And the reason we get blue here is that this percentage is the amount of color 1 that we will get here. So if we get a 0% of color 1 being red, we will only get the value of color 2. We will get 100% of color 2, which is blue. Now if I make this 100%, we will be getting 100% of color 1, and therefore a 0% of color 2, and thus we will end with red over here. So it is not as intuitive as it could be, but this is how this filter works. Now let's say that I wanted to convert colors from one format to the other. I'll have here my variable color 3, and this one will be green, so we'll start at 00 ff00, and let's just print it for now. So color 3. If I save this, you should see this one over here. But now let's say that I need this in RGB. I can say convert color to RGB here, and I'll get the color as RGB. And now I can also say that if I have this as RGB already, so let's say that I have 0 to 55 0, I can say color to hex, and I'll get my color as hex now. I can also convert it to HSL in case I was using that. And to prove that in all these cases we are getting the same color, let's copy this swatch over here, and let's say that the background will be color 3. If I save this, we get this green. If I convert this color to HSL, this should be outside of here, so color to HSL, I still get this green when the page refreshes, and with hex the same, I still get this green over here. Last color related filter that we'll see is color contrast. This will let us know how much contrast there is between two colors, usually between the background color and the foreground color, and that way we will be able to adjust either one of them accordingly to meet the accessibility threshold or accessibility level that we are trying to comply with. So let's say that here I have white and I want to see how much contrast it has with black. If I save this, I get 21 here. We'll see what this number mean in a moment. But now let's copy all of this here, and let's say that I want to see how much contrast white has with this other color, which, just to illustrate, this color looks like this. So it is this very light gray, and it has a 1.1 contrast ratio. So what does this mean? And what this means is that for accessibility best practices, we should have at least 4.5 for normal text and 3 for large text. And if we're targeting level AAA, which is the maximum level, we should have at least 7 for normal text and 4.5 for large text. So keep this in mind if you want to do your best to comply with these accessibility guidelines. Now let's see image filters. So I'll go back into the code here, and let's say that I want to display the image for the first product in this collection. So I'll do collection products first. I'm going to say featured image, and then I'm going to get the image URL. For this, I should also pass the width and height parameters, so I get an image that is no larger than what I actually need in the page, so the users, the customers, don't end up loading more data than what they need to load. Now here this says that this is an invalid URL input, and it's because this collection is empty. But if we go to a collection that actually has a first product, like this one, here we get the URL for this image. And now if I pass it here the image tag filter, I will get the image for this product just like this. And now what is the difference between using image tag and copying all of this here and doing this? So I could also do this, and that should work. But here you can see that we don't have alt text. Shopify is throwing this error here that we should be using loading eager for images that are visible in viewport or loading lazy for others. And by using the image tag here, image tag, all of this gets taken care of by Shopify automatically. So let's see the HTML that we get for this, and here we can see that we get this alt text, which Shopify did not generate this. It was populated when we created the store with some test products. If your product image doesn't have an alt text, this won't show. Anyways, here we can see that we also get this src attribute populated with different sizes for our image. We get the width and height attributes, and yes, that's it. But we get a lot for free basically, and it's also less code to manage, so we should use the image tag whenever possible. And by the way, you may see in older code bases both image URL written like this and image tag written like this. Both of these are now deprecated, so you should be using image URL written as it is being written here, and image tag as it is being written here. Now let's say that I wanted to display an image from the assets folder here. So I found this snowboard image.jpg, and let's see how we can display it. So I should put here the exact name of the file in the assets folder. So I copied this and paste it here, and then I will use asset image URL. This one accepts a string as a parameter, and here we can specify the size. So size in this case is specified this way, and if I save this, we see that the URL is this one. This is the size that I just specified. And now, unfortunately, we cannot use the image tag filter here. It will throw an error. Input to image tag must be an image URL. So instead, what we have to do is to build this image manually. So something like this. Then we'll say I'll just say snowboard, although something more descriptive will be appropriate. Loading will be eager here because Shopify will otherwise complain if I don't specify the loading property. The width will be 500 and the height will be 500. And if I save this, I see here the snowboard image from my assets directory. Now let me show you how you can add CSS from the assets directory. So let's take this CSS from here. I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to create a file here called tutorial.css, and I'm going to paste this. Now if I save this, the styles that I had here. So I had styles for highlighting this text, and I had styles for the swatches. They are no longer being displayed because we haven't included this file yet. So to include this, I'm going to say tutorial.css, and I'm going to use the asset URL filter, and then I'm going to use the style sheet tag filter. And if I save this, now we see that the style sheet is being included. Through this asset URL filter, we can include any file that is in the assets directory. So we are not limited to just CSS or JavaScript files. We can also include, for example, files for our fonts. We can also include audio files if we wanted to display audio effects for some interactions in the site, and so on. Now let me show you how we can include a script. So let me create tutorial.js, and I'm just going to use alert to say hello from tutorial.js. I'm going to save this. If I go to the page, nothing is showing because we haven't included it, but I can open a script tag here. I'm going to close it, and then as its source, I'm going to set tutorial.js. I'm going to specify asset URL, and then I'm going to set the defer attribute, because otherwise we will get an error if we don't specify defer or async here. If I save this, I go to the site, and I refresh this, I see here hello from tutorial.js. Now at this point we've covered a lot of useful filters, but there are still plenty more that you can explore. I'm going to leave the link of this page in the video description, which has a list of every filter that's available in Liquid with Shopify, and you can explore them. There are some that are specific to certain resources, like for example some filters that are specific for collections, some filters that are specific for customers, some filters that are specific for payments, and so on. So depending on what you're trying to do, you could use this as a reference guide and find the filters that are suited for that. Now, before closing the video, let's cover a few miscellaneous things that can help us at the time of writing Liquid. So let me delete all of this here. And the first thing we'll do is cover the Liquid tag here. So this tag will help us at the time of writing longer blocks of Liquid. So you've seen throughout this video that whenever I need to write something in Liquid, I have to do this open curly bracket %, and then inside of this, create my Liquid expression. So assign my variable equals 10. You've seen that I have to use this all the time. And if we are writing a lot of Liquid, this can get annoying. So instead, we can use this to get things a bit easier. So for example, assign my variable equals 10. Now for product in collection.products and 4. And let's say that I want to print the product title. So when we are using Liquid to print, we have to use echo, otherwise it won't work. So if I remove echo here, we see we have this error. And anyways, if I save this was from the previous code that we had here. And now when this refreshes, we see all the product titles in the page. And let's say that we wanted to print each one in its own line. I can wrap this inside p tags by doing this. So here I'll use append, and then I'll use append again to close this p tag. And if I save this, now each product title goes in its own line. We see until it clicks on a different collection here, but we can see that no matter the collection, each product title goes in its own line. And now, let's say that I wanted to access this variable from outside this Liquid block. Can I do that? Well, yes. I can print this here. This variable is 10, and I should see a 10 at the end of the page now. Here at the end of this block of text, this is my variable. This is the value of my variable here. Okay, so the next thing we'll see is the render tag. We saw this at the beginning of the video when we added this line over here to render in this exact spot the content of tutorial.liquid. So render can basically take any file in the snippets directory and replace this line with the content of this file. However, it can also receive arguments. So we can pass arguments two ways. We can pass a default argument with the with keyword. So here, let's say default argument here. And if I save this, To access this string, this default argument string, I just have to access the variable that is named exactly how this file is named. So in this case, tutorial. By printing this, I see default argument. Now we can also pass named arguments. So let's say that I want to pass here title. And the value here will be my title. If I save this and I access here title, I see here my title. We can also pass more than one argument. So let's say description here, my description. If I save this and print description, I see the value of description here in the page. We just have to make sure we separate them by comma. Now, something important to notice here is that, like when we are declaring an if statement, that we cannot use filters in the conditional, we cannot use filters when passing an argument to here. So for example, if I wanted to make this description uppercase by using the uppercase filter, I can save this, but my description still is not in uppercase, even though this doesn't throw any error. We just don't get the the value we expected. So if we wanted to pass a description in uppercase, we'll have to declare an intermediary variable. So description in uppercase, and here we make this uppercase and then pass description in uppercase. And now we should see my description in uppercase. We can also use default arguments here. So for example, let's say that the title argument is optional. We can say title equals title, or default, let's say default title. If I save this and I remove, well, let's first see what happens if I don't touch anything. My title is still here. But now if I remove title from the parameters here, we see that now we have here default title instead of my title, and the description remains the same. In this line, what I'm doing is that I'm redeclaring the title variable, but this title over here refers to the parameter that you're passing to the snippet. Another thing worth mentioning about snippets is that if your snippet receives parameters, a common practice is to, at the top, create a comment like this one that specifies what the snippet does, what parameters it receives, the data types of those parameters, if the parameter is optional, like this one for example, what the default value is in case it has one, and an example of how to render this snippet. Because as you can see here, snippets can get pretty lengthy, and it will be very time consuming for a programmer new to this codebase to have to go through each one of them to figure out how to use them, instead of just know that this receives X, Y, and Z parameters and pass them that way. This one, for example, is almost 400 lines long. So yes, this comment here for a programmer new to this codebase can be really helpful at the time. Something else we may want to do while working with Liquid is debugging, and luckily we have a few tools to our disposal for that. The first one is the JSON filter, which we saw earlier in the video. So here, if I say collection.products.first and use the JSON filter here, we can see that we have a JSON representation of the first product in the collection, the first product in this collection, sorry. And now we can also say, let's say that we needed to print this in JavaScript for some reason. We can also do that. So collection.products.first. I will have to remove these quotation marks and say JSON. And if I close this and I open the console, here I'm going to see this JSON over here in case for some reason we needed to print things in JavaScript for debugging. We could also print any arbitrary liquid data. So if I wanted to print this collection title, I can do that too. So here I see the collection title here is products. But there is a newer tool for debugging that is more sophisticated than these two, and that is Team Console in the Shopify CLI. So let's run Shopify theme console. And if I run this, it will say that I need to activate this in the browser. It will say that it is already activated. So now here I have access to the console where I can start debugging liquid statements. So for example, let's say that I want to print shop.name here. I see the shop's name. If I say shop only, it says that this object cannot be printed, but you can access its fields. And that's unfortunate, but some objects are not accessible neither here nor through the JSON filter. If I try to access shop with the JSON filter, I also will get an error telling me that I cannot access it that way here. JSON not allows for this object. Now let's say that I wanted to access in the theme console objects that are specific to a page. So for example, the collection object is specific to pages that are a collection. So pages like this one. If I try accessing collection.title here, it will throw an error because this theme console by default is running in the home page, which is not a collection. However, if I close this and pass a URL here, so I will say collections all here, this will open the browser again to prompt me to log in. It got authenticated, and now here I can say collection, the title, and I see products. And if I check this over here, the title of this collection is products. And that's it for this video. We covered plenty of things specific to Liquid and Shopify's variation of Liquid, which as mentioned here, extends the open source version of Liquid for using in Shopify themes. There are still some other things to cover that are specific to Shopify, such as sections, meta fields, meta objects, and many more, which we'll cover in the future. In the next video, we'll see the file structure of a Shopify theme and what each of those directories does. If you found this video useful, remember to like and subscribe for more Shopify related content, and I'll see you all in the next video.